So now I want to turn your attention over here to stage number 3 to welcome the guy who came up with the idea for the Business Summit, U.S. Senator Ron Wyden.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And congratulations to Duncan Wise, John Carter, Malia Wasson. I don't know if we've given them a big round of applause, but what a terrific job. 1,200 to 1,300 people here today. Not to worry about a long speech from me. I intend to keep my remarks shorter than the Ducks will need to score their first 2 touchdowns against Ohio State. And we're going to talk a bit about innovation today, and I think we all know the Ducks sure showed a lot of innovation in the Rose Bowl, and we're very proud of them. This, of course, is the 12th Leadership Summit. We have met through wars, through a housing boom, and a devastating economic crash, and now we are on our way to a recovery. Unemployment is down, business and families are feeling more confident, and certainly it has been a while since we have met with this kind of backdrop of positive economic news. So I'm going to describe my talk real briefly. I believe the economic agenda for 2015 should come down to 5 words: bigger paychecks for working families. Now, that 5-word agenda is concise enough to get into a tweet, but obviously it's a little more complicated than a tweet to build an economy that gives everybody in Oregon a chance to get ahead. So let's talk for a few minutes about how we have those policies that produce better and bigger private sector paychecks. My view has always been that government does not create jobs. I do not have a big old machine on my desk where I just whir the thing around a few times and then out pop the jobs. The jobs come from the private sector. And if I and my colleagues at the federal, state, and local level can help set the temperature right, all of you can go out and do your thing and create those jobs, those good-paying jobs in the private sector. That's what markets are all about. And when we do it, we create jobs that increase demand for goods and services. That means better pay, better jobs for thousands of unemployed or underemployed Oregonians who are looking for work to help come out of poverty. And there are thousands of Oregonians more eager for opportunities to get up the career ladder, or, as I'll describe today, get up the economic summit. Their families having to make the impossible choice between saving for retirement and sending their kids to college. Their students who are up to their eyeballs in debt when they graduate, or sometimes they don't graduate and still have the crushing debts. And there are entrepreneurs whose startups, with just a modest amount of sensible government policy, can outgrow the garage. And there have been businesses unable to plan and invest because of the cloud of uncertainty that hangs over them, thanks to red tape and, too often, Washington partisanship. Meeting that challenge, creating bigger paychecks for working families, is going to be my focus in the Congress. And I may not know an ice axe from a harness, but I do know what tools are needed to help climb the summit in the Oregon economy. And for all of us who are elected officials at the federal, state, and local level, I would submit today that it's basically about what I call the 5 T's. And this is what I'll focus on for these brief remarks. The first of the T's is technology. These jobs pay better, and we must simply pull out all the stops to get Oregon's digital goods and services into global markets. The Oregonian noted recently that technology companies were Oregon's best performing companies in 2014, and that's a healthy sign of growth in our Silicon Forest. A 2013 study by the State Employment Department shows why it's so important to keep the tech sector healthy and on the front burner. The study said that the state's tech jobs now pay an average of $94,000 a year, more than double Oregon's average. Now, there are a host of tech issues to tackle: keeping discriminatory taxes away from innovation, keeping monopolies from controlling the net, and ensuring young men and women graduating from college can get those good-paying jobs. I'll be blunt here. I believe our current education model, our current higher education model, cannot continue when far too many students and families end up questioning whether students are graduating with a degree and a certificate and it's got real-world value to a real-world employer. I've introduced a bipartisan bill, the Know Before You Go Act, that begins to introduce competitive forces to hold down costs for education, and that ought to be a priority for our state. At the same time, it's long overdue to move away from a one-size-fits-all insistence that only a four-year degree spells economic success. Our state has embraced this shift with the 40-40-20 goal that aspires to have every single Oregon high school student graduate with a college and career-ready high school diploma. This means strengthening partnerships between high schools and local businesses to make sure that those diplomas are truly career-ready. Last fall in Yamhill County, I saw how this would work. Meggitt, a manufacturer of advanced products, helped rebuild Yamhill Carlton's high school manufacturing shop and ensured that students were learning the skills necessary to succeed in a job at their nearby operation. So Malia said we ought to be about challenges today. Here's my first. I challenge every employer here today who can to step up and build similar community partnerships to help students climb the economic ladder. And so I challenge all of you to hire young people through great programs. We've got one right here in Multnomah County that Loretta Smith has developed that Boeing, Legacy Health, and others have used. So that's number one T. The second T, and it's apropos of your focus today on trade, is tough trade law enforcement. I have long said that what we ought to be doing in our state is growing things here, making things here, add value to them here, and then ship them somewhere. And there is a demand all over the world for Oregon goods and Oregon brands. But the key to opening up these global markets is enforcing the laws, the trade laws that already exist. And I've met with a lot of promising export businesses, and to get them into these international markets, the rules have to be enforced. One of those businesses is Met1, an innovative high-tech company in Grants Pass that makes its top-notch air quality monitoring systems and sends them around the world. A second business is Straw Propeller Gourmet Foods, a Redmond business that started as a family operation. And there's a demand for their healthy cereals far and wide from Central Oregon. But these companies that are making these exciting and innovative products have got to know that their government is enforcing the trade laws. And that's why I've made it a special priority to focus on trade law enforcement, because trade policy hasn't kept up with the times. I look back at the Clinton trade era and NAFTA and those bills. We didn't have iPhones. We didn't have text messaging back then. So it is long past time to update our laws, and the single biggest priority here is standing up for Oregon producers by enforcing the trade laws. Countries like China have become experts at finding ways to lock out our businesses. They've used the internet to spy on our companies, including right here in Oregon with SolarWorld, that wanted nothing other than to be able to manufacture its products and be able to compete in tough global markets. Last month, I was proud to see that our fight was beginning to bear fruit when the Commerce Department said it was going to enforce the trade laws in the renewable area, and particularly with SolarWorld. And one other bit of good economic news on the trade front for 2015. President Obama's historic step with respect to Cuba offers a lot of economic opportunities for Oregon as well. Oregon's Ag Department says that 100% of our hazelnuts, blackberries, and black raspberries exported from the United States, it's grown in our state. A huge percentage of the wheat grown here in Oregon is also exported. There are some people in Cuba, folks, who would like to enjoy the Oregon brand, the Oregon products. We have an opportunity now to get it to them. Opening world markets to products and goods made by Oregonians and to make sure everybody plays by the rules is key to prosperity in our state. The third T on my agenda list is tax reform. The current tax code, the federal tax code, is really a rotting economic carcass. My wife always says, "Stop there, dear, because you're going to frighten the children." But I mean, it's infected with loopholes and inefficiencies. And the last big tax bill in Washington, D.C., at a time when all of you need certainty and predictability, had a shelf life shorter than a carton of eggs. Now, clearly, that is not going to produce what we need in Oregon for our small businesses and for growth. So a special priority for me and to make sure that we have bigger paychecks for working families is to end, stop, and start a tax policy. The fourth of the 5 T's is transportation. And it is obvious that it is not possible to have big league economic growth with little league infrastructure. You just can't do it. And we know that there is a realistic set of alternatives, and Washington has not been delivering them. Now, you really can't even make this stuff up, but the last transportation bill in Washington, D.C. was funded by employers holding off on funding private pensions. Just put that one around your head as you kind of think about the absurdity of federal policy and their alternatives. I showed that with the Build America Bonds program, where in the space of a year and a half, $181 billion worth of Build America bonds were sold. There is a market for private sector investment, and we've got some of that market here today. We're very proud that Mark Holtzman from the U.S. Rural Infrastructure Opportunity Fund is here. They're a good example of what a 21st century infrastructure ought to look like. It is a $100 billion partnership dedicated to investing in infrastructure in rural America. Mark, will you stand up so that everybody here can recognize you? Folks, I have told Duncan to lock the doors here and make sure that everybody who wants to gets a chance to talk to Mark before they leave. The last T that I'm going to talk about is timber. And many elected officials just fear that this is going to be the issue that is their undoing. And there's a pretty long history of elected officials having their fingers singed by touching timber. I do not feel that way, and I'm just briefly going to tell you why. The cold fact is that timber is a proxy for virtually every rural economic issue, and certainly every rural economic issue, as John said, that divides us. The other hard fact is that natural resources policy has always been about heavy lifting and elected officials being willing to do it. The ONC Act we've been trying to update only dates back 8 decades to 1937. And when it comes to the decades-old water wars in the Klamath, we've been working there for a settlement since 2002. Now, let's be clear. Waiving bedrock environmental laws is a dead end. And folks, we have seen that movie before, and it doesn't end well. That was what the Spotted Owl rider was all about. And the mills lost, and the communities lost, and we didn't do what was needed for environmental protection. Now, I know that given all these past battles, there's a little bit of a sense of resignation with respect to natural resources policy. Let me tell you why I'm not resigned to the status quo. First of all, I have seen that there is a better future, and I was honored to be part of it. We were looking at seeing the last mill in Eastern Oregon closed down, and we were able to be part of an effort where environmentalists and timber companies came together, and we were able in Washington to create a 10-year stewardship contract, a 10-year Malheur stewardship contract that's providing the foundation for local mills so that manufacturing is done right in John Day. And there's a big economic multiplier. When you ride into town, you now see a kind of boarding house that's back in business. The store is doing well. There's a big economic multiplier putting people to work back in forestry. And I think we can do the same thing with the incredible sweat equity efforts that we've seen in Klamath Falls. When we had a hearing in the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, it was going well. We said, why don't we follow it up? And everybody was in the office at 3 that afternoon, and we built what I think is going to be the model for how you bring people together, a special homegrown task force. And I will tell you, we are going to resolve the water wars in the Klamath Basin and figure out a solution that works for the farmers, works for the fish, works for the tribes, and I pledge to you today we're going to get that done in this Congress. The last point, we cannot let our rural communities become sacrifice zones. Oregon did achieve a landmark agreement in the Malheur, and we did it because we said it wasn't acceptable to just write off the last mill in Eastern Oregon. It's not acceptable to say, well, let's just sit it out until there's no water left in the Klamath when the state feels so strongly about our farmers and our families and our tribes and our ranchers. And my view is that we can meet the big economic challenges that Malia and John were talking about by working together through more teamwork. And I like to think that the challenges I've tried to outline, bad pun, to a T, help to create bigger paychecks for working families. It really comes down to what the Ducks have shown us all this year, which is teamwork and making sure that we all understand that we row in the boat together. So I'd like you all, as Malia indicated, to try to find some ways to step up. I talked about giving a young person a chance to prove themselves. I'd like to see more employers hire older people who want to get back in the workforce. And I've got one other very special request, something that's important to me, something that's important to Oregonians, and that is for the men and women who wear the uniform of the United States, who have sacrificed so much for our state and our country. My last request here at this summit, something we've enjoyed for more than a decade, I'd like to ask each of you here today to hire more veterans. And in Oregon, I like to say we believe every day is Veterans Day. And one of the best ways we can honor that spirit is to make sure our vets are gainfully employed. And as you know, they have ideal skills for so many of your businesses. They understand tech, they understand work ethic. They have certainly earned a bigger place in the Oregon economy, and I would ask that this group reach out and find ways to take our spirit of teamwork, the teamwork that's going to grow the Oregon economy, produce more and bigger paychecks for the people of our state, and put more vets on the team. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing my colleague. He is being sworn in today. He's been a wonderful partner on so many issues that are important to our state. He deserves a lot of credit for his efforts as it relates to water, the Klamath, Central Oregon. Done a terrific job in making sure the Coast Guard stays in Newport. Been a wonderful partner for me on all of those issues, as well as timber, and particularly helping people climb that ladder of opportunity, climb the economic summit, as we might call it in our state. Now let's welcome my colleague in the Senate delegation who's being sworn in today in Washington, D.C. Otherwise, he'd been here. A big Oregon welcome now for Senator Jeff Merkley.